Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's monthly webinar. I'm Tanya and I have Cami here with me today, and we're going to get started so we can learn from Monique today. So today, Monique is going to present on scaling your influence, personal branding for entrepreneurs. And we'd like to thank Center for Rural Affairs for sponsoring our webinar trainings. And so they did provide us a quick video here. And so we'll just watch that quickly.
Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar, sponsored by the Center for Rural Affairs. My name is Nikki Chitwood, and I'm the Panhandle Loan Specialist. As one of the many services we provide, I am here to introduce to you our lending services. When a bank can't help you with your dreams of homeownership or growing a business, the Center for Rural Affairs can. We offer coaching and financing to help you become a homeowner and start or grow a sustainable business. Please feel free to contact me at 308-631-0157, or you can visit cfra.org for more information.
So thank you Center for Rural Affairs for sponsoring our webinar series, and definitely a great resource to check out throughout the state of Nebraska. And then we'd like to thank our featured sponsor, Russ's Market, for being our sponsor of the month for these trainings. They're a great partner with Grow Nebraska, and so we'd like to thank them. And then we'd also like to feature our member of the month, Anna Fair from the Heart. She's been with a member with us since 2019, and just stay on the look for a potential recipe book she's coming out with. And so she's looking at launching that with Sailing Through Grow Nebraska. And so if you're wanting all those fun recipes, they definitely look delicious. So check her out. And then today's presenter is Monique Farmer. And so I'm just going to let you take it away here, Monique.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I know I can't see you all, but I know you're there, and I'm excited to do this presentation with you this afternoon. I want to give a thanks and shout out to Tanya and Cami, who have been a great help behind the scenes in getting us all prepared for today. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen so that we have something guiding us while we get through this afternoon's discussion. Okay. All right. So this is the cover screen for this afternoon. We're going to talk about how you can scale your influence through building your personal brand. And we're going to talk about the importance of personal branding and how it has an intersection between the brand that you're building and your business as a small business and entrepreneur. And then we're going to talk about how you leverage that brand equity for credibility through a case study that I'm going to share with you this afternoon. I want to share some brief information about myself. I know that Tanya sent a bio ahead of today, but one of the things that I'll touch on a bit as we get through the presentation is one of the last official industry positions that I had before I made the transition into entrepreneurship. I also concurrently teach one class asynchronously for the University of Texas at Austin. So just wanted to mention that as well. But prior to that, I led the communication strategy for Omaha Public Schools, which is the largest school district in the state of Nebraska. And so after about maybe like the first quarter of my experience working there and really getting a feel for, what the internal perception was of the district, and since I was leading the communication strategy, what the internal perception was of how well the district was performing with regard to communication inside and then the external relations. I ended up having the light bulb go off where I realized, okay, we've got some organizational pride and potentially some employee appreciation challenges that we should address as a communication team and interweave into our communication strategy. But not only that, after discovering it, it would have been the first time really that the school district embarked upon a branding initiative of any sort. And to just give you a bit more specifics around what I mean by that, brand, as we go through this presentation, you'll see has a lot of different elements. But at its most granular level, if we're even just talking about the logo, the logos at the time for the school district were all kinds of different crazy colors that people were using from school to school, from at the central office. Sometimes people would stretch them. Just there was so much work that needed to happen from a stabilization standpoint. And so that would have been in 2016. That's really when I got to become a student of understanding the power of brand and brand equity and what it can do for an organization. So want to start with that, and we will keep it moving here. So small business owners, I'd love to see in the chat, and I think Tanya and Cami are going to help me this afternoon. I want to know what the number one takeaway is that you came here to get out of today's presentation. I know firsthand as an entrepreneur myself that it is a luxury and privilege to have access to some of your time, because time is skimpy when you're an entrepreneur, especially when you're first getting started or you're trying to scale, because you're trying to do all of the things and you have to be very disciplined and strategic about where and when you spend your time. So again, it's my privilege to get to have some of that with you this afternoon, but I want to know what you came here to get. And I would love to have Tanya and Cami help me to know what some of those things are in the chat. Wait, maybe I can see the chat. Okay, so there's more questions maybe that will, the specific questions, Cami and Tanya, I'd like to take those when we get more near the end of the presentation, except for unless they correlate directly with what we're talking about. But right now I'm hoping to see what people came to get, just so I can kind of keep track of that as we move forward.
I think Jenna was wanting to know more about like some takeaways from today's presentation about specific ways to stand out with your branding.
Okay,
And then Shane was wanting to maybe how to create the brand, but also how to leverage it.
I love it. Okay, we're gonna hit it. We're gonna hit some of it.
Oh, and then
Okay.
Angela mentioned she just wanted to learn your number one branding thought that most entrepreneurs overlook when creating your brand.
Ah, okay. I will weave it in, people. If we don't get to it by the end, please resurface it for me, and we'll keep moving here. Thank you for doing that. So I love to start with getting attention whenever I'm doing a presentation, and what better way to do that than to start with a really good story. So that cute little guy that you see off to the left with all of the cake all over his fingertips, trying to touch the camera with it, that is my son, who in the picture at the time would have been 2 years old. He's way older than that, as you can see now off to the right, where I'm standing next to him, where he graduated from basic training in San Antonio, which serendipitously enough, I'm going there this weekend because I now have a nephew that's going to graduate from basic training. So I'll get to go back there for the same reason and do the river walk and all the fun things down in San Antonio, maybe get a little slightly warmer weather, even though we've been having amazing weather here. But the little guy with the cake on his hands would have been sitting in my back seat of my Toyota Sienna charcoal blue van, buckled in, sitting in his car seat one rainy day when I walked out of a Toys R Us store and had the bag with that logo on it and got in and sat it in the back seat near his feet. And he had on some brown Timberland boots, and those boots were kicking. They were kicking because he was excited and he wanted to tear into that bag. He couldn't read a single word at 2 years old, maybe starting to hear some stories that were frequent enough for him to make out some of the words on inside of some of his storybooks, but he couldn't read. But he knew that inside of that bag was something he wanted, toys. But I didn't give him the bag because they weren't his toys. It was a birthday party gift for one of his cousins. But I like to open with that story because it speaks to the psychological connection that we all have with brand. And I want you to think of some of even like your favorite products that you use, that you go back to the store time and time again to use, especially those items that you could potentially get in a generic version. One of my favorite products is the Tide Pods. And I started to use those pods initially because I heard about them through a social media post that one of my friends put on Facebook and talked about how great these pods were. Now, this was the time when many of us were transitioning away from the liquid detergent, which was all kind of messy, right? Like it drip on stuff and get on you, get on your clothes, or maybe clunk up. But I was told the Tide Pods didn't have any of those issues. And I was already a really good loyalist to the Tide brand. And I'm not really sure why. I think that when I think about a brand that smells good and it's a brand that I have been consistently using, I kind of got psychologically and emotionally connected to the brand. So I'd love to hear what some of your favorite brands are that you use on a regular basis, whether they're cosmetic or whether they are staples that you use to keep your day-to-day together, or brands that make you you. Would love to see some of those in the chat as we transition forward. So I mentioned taking on one of my first really large brand initiative endeavors when I worked for Omaha Public Schools. And I know many of you know OPS, one of the top employers in the state of Nebraska, educates about 1 out of 5 students in this state. Huge brand inherently, but maybe as an enterprise didn't recognize that they even had a brand because they're thinking of themselves as a not-for-profit entity that provides a public service. But again, me and my team begged to differ. And so we essentially had to, after we put together this strategy to implement branding across the district, we kind of had to go on a bit of a buy-in roadshow with the leadership and the Board of Education and school principals and department heads to get us all cohesively on one page with regard to our brand, and not just the look and feel. Our brand, remember before I mentioned organizational pride and I mentioned employee appreciation endeavors, and your brand, according to Steve Forbes, who all of us are familiar with the Forbes brand, it's the single most important investment that you can make in your business. And so when we think about the school district, since I'm using that essentially a bit as a case study this afternoon, the elements that make up that brand come out of what people perceive about the brand. So that comes from what's in the media coverage, what's on TV, what's the newspaper printing about the school district. The school district that we live in, and many of us who are parents, we know this. We essentially make decisions about where we're going to purchase a home directly correlated oftentimes with the school district, because we, especially if we're building families, we want our kids to go to a good school district. If at all possible, we don't have to come out of pocket to finance their educations. We love that. A school district also has impact on what is taking place with property values, because if the school district is rated higher, our property values go up. One of the things too that was cool that I kind of learned when I was working for the school district is even the news stations. One of the news stations told me at one juncture that when they are conducting research to find out what the city wants to know about in terms of news, time and time again, at the top of that list, people across the city want to know what's happening in the schools, which again, it was a light bulb lever that went off for me at the time. So again, Steve Forbes tells us your brand is the single most important investment you make in your business, because there are so many other tentacles that get associated with your business as a result of that brand. So as a college professor, I can't help it. I often like to understand the context, the history, and the science behind stuff. And so as I was preparing this presentation, I did a little bit of research on the science behind branding. And the science of branding has its roots in ancient civilizations, where merchants and craftsmen would mark their products with symbols or signatures to really identify and differentiate their goods from the goods of others. However, the modern concept of branding as we know it today really started to emerge around the 19th century. And one of the earliest pioneers of modern branding was the American businessman and inventor, Thomas J. Barrett. Now, he's often referred to as the father of modern advertising. And in the late 1800s, he worked for a London-based soap company known as A&F Piers. And he's credited with developing many of the modern branding techniques that we use today, including creating that consistent visual identity for a company, and then developing other memorable aspects of that brand, whether it's slogans or jingles. And so on the screen in front of you right now, you see the park ranger looking guy in the cave, but hopefully you also see a lot of logos that are connected with brands that you recognize, especially even on a day-to-day basis. You see these brands. When we see the symbols, they make us think about something specific that's connected to that brand. And another notable figure in history, when we talk about branding, is David Ogilvy. I know many of you have heard of Ogilvy, the advertising company. It's a global company. He founded that agency, Ogilvy and Mather, in the 50s, and it's known for, he's known for his influential book, Confessions of an Advertising Man. And Walter Landor, who founded the design firm Landor Associates, is also one of the names we'll hear when we talk about really the pioneers of branding as a science. And in the 40s, his work in developing strong brand identities for companies like Coca-Cola and Levi's left a huge imprint on the whole science of branding. So just a little history to think about, like, how do we get to a place where we kind of have this process where we're building a brand? So let's do some more engagement and interaction, people. In the chat, is this a brand? Yes or no? We'll see how close the students are paying attention this afternoon, Cammie and Tanya. We got some quiet ones. I know sometimes people are doing other things or eating lunch, and that's fine too. Just pipe in if you have questions, and put them in the chat as we move along here. So oops, I'm supposed to answer before I keep going. The answer is what Jenna has in the chat. It's a logo for a brand. Yes, yes, yes. Is the apple the entire brand? No. No. Yep, that's right, Jenna. Thanks for leading the pack there. So, oops, the logo, as many of you, I'm sorry, as Jenna mentioned, the logo itself is just one aspect of the brand, but it can be a very powerful aspect. It's essentially that graphical depiction of what we want to represent, right? The logo is the thing that we want to think about when we show ourselves to the world. It's the thing that we want to use to leave that indelible imprint on the mind of that client or consumer. So the logo is a very important, but it's not the brand entirely. And the logo should have a story behind it. So here's two logos that we have on the screen right now. The first is the FedEx logo, and I love to use these because the graphic designers who created these logos were brilliant in terms of how they use story or intention of that business to represent it through the logo and the brand elements like the colors. But if we look between the E and the X on that FedEx logo, we see what? An arrow. And that arrow was intentionally put there, though that logo was designed in that way to represent movement and direction. And we know that many of us see FedEx trucks on a day-to-day basis, moving things around our community, delivering things, or we're going to the store to ship something out, or in the midst of the pandemic, that's how we got products and services to continue moving even when we weren't, because we were in quarantine. So it is a great representation of what that company does and who that company is. The Amazon logo. And some of you may have seen or have these brought to your attention before, you just inherently notice them. But if we look right below the A and we see the little smiley face come up and kind of the smirk part of that land right there underneath the Z, the intention behind that when the logo was created was to communicate that Amazon could get you anything or get it delivered to you from A to Z. You can pretty much buy anything you're looking for on a day-to-day basis if you go out to Amazon.com. And I can attest, because I get plenty of Amazon.com packages here at my office on a day-to-day basis. So Jenna, you're spot on. It's more than the logo. This is a depiction of the brand, because the brand is the comprehensive makeup of the essence of all the things that make Apple Apple. Whether we're talking about the Apple Watch or the experience that we get when we're listening to Apple Music, or being able to have our world in the palm of our hands. That wasn't always the case. So we know Apple to be the innovative, risk-taking company that looks for ways to make life better or more comfortable. I'm actually a huge Apple fan and have all Apple products. I made myself intentionally wean myself from a PC to the MacBook. I think that was in 2016, so that I can have all my Apple products talking to each other, because that's an experience, that's an essence. The way that I feel when I interact with that brand, the thing that has made me yet a loyalist to another brand is because of all of the things that comprise that experience that I have when I'm dealing with an Apple product. So I want to stop here because I don't want to move too fast or too far, especially in the event that somebody has a question swirling inside of them right now. So if you want to pose a question, feel free to put it in the chat. Cami and Tanya, can they do their mic?
They cannot, I'd have to bring them on stage, but they can, if someone wants to come on stage, I can bring them on.
Okay, and the chat's fine. I just want to stop to see if we have any questions before I keep moving here.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like none. We'll keep going. So one of the other points that I want to surface as we're having this discussion about all of the elements that make up the essence of a brand, small business owners, you are right now one of those key elements. So we think about the fact that the two Steves, right, like started this global trillion dollar enterprise that today is Apple, and it started in a garage. So their personal brands, they had to lean on and leverage quite a bit. We've all seen Steve Jobs in that signature black turtleneck and those jeans, the guy who was full of creative ideas, the guy, again, who was a risk taker, who was a visionary, who knew how to go and find the right talent or the right financiers to bring his dream to fruition. Think about what you think about when you think about Steve Jobs and his personal brand, but also think about how that personal brand and who he was in essence as a person intersected with, and currently even to this day intersects with, who Apple became and who they continue to be to this very day. And then I want you to think about yourself and your brand. So your logo at the top, you in the center. And think about what are the qualities that you have that are currently, as a person, what makes your brand. So I'll share some things that I know about myself, because I've done this exercise that's in the chat that I'm encouraging you to do. If you've got 5 trusted friends, text each one of them, even while we're sitting here. Just think about the 5 most trusted people that you're like, they're going to be honest. They won't mind that I'm bugging them in the middle of the day with this text, but ask them, what are 5 words you would use to describe me? So I've done this exercise. So I have the 25 words posted on my bulletin board in my office. And so it's interesting to watch how some of those words overlap and come back, especially if you're thinking about different people describing you. So I get strategic, or I get bossy, or I get can be sassy, or I get innovative. So I'm thinking personally, because I'm the person who's currently driving my small business, how do I integrate those attributes, whether I'm doing that through the mission or the vision, that aspirational vision that I have for my business, or how we live out values on a day-to-day basis, because it always starts with the founder. It always starts with the person who created that organization, whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit, and who puts their imprint on how it's shaping and what it ends up becoming. So I want you to think about what personal qualities you have that are currently shaping and overlapping with your business? And if you're not liking some of the words that you see come back, how can you change them? How can you change them? So I just want to bring this point home with a couple of other examples beyond Steve Jobs, using some of those iconic brands that we all recognize. Let's start with McDonald's. And there right on the screen is the two brothers. I'd love to see show yeses or nos if you've seen the movie The Founder, which is incredibly entertaining. But what we learn in that movie, I believe it's on Netflix now. What we learn is, these two brothers had this vision to create, they wanted to create tasty burgers. They wanted to, they were thinking, we want to build this business. Yeah, we want to make money, but we also want to make sure that our customers are having a consistent experience. We can do this more efficiently, but it's about good burgers. It's about good food. It's about good, just American food that makes people feel good, that they can get on the run. Maybe they drive it through a drive-through at the time. Those were bigs. And then on the scene, they brought in Ray Kroc. And so Ray had that scalable mindset, right? So he came in, and what he ended up learning through his own network to bring in some additional experts to think about how can we scale McDonald's is that really where the money is in this real estate, not necessarily in these burgers. So yes, we have that book of business, but how can we scale using real estate? So that became a big part of the McDonald's model. But even thinking about the different personalities and, what we see today, because Ray Kroc and this ideology about scaling is what created this global enterprise we're now all very familiar with. Every one of us on this call has eaten McDonald's. Every one of us. So think about how those personal attributes carried over into the business. Again, whether intentionally or unintentionally, think about Walt Disney. Everybody wants to go to Disney World. If they haven't been, they want to go. If they win the lottery and they get asked what they're going to do, many people have said, I'm going to Disney World. So what we know about Walt Disney is that he was also very innovative and he could see beyond what was currently in front of him. He looked at a swamp in Florida. He looked at a swamp, but instead saw this utopian euphoria, childlike experience world that we all know today as Disney World. If you've ever been through Magic Kingdom or you've ever been to one of those Disney shows, it's like this pop-up world that's an alternative universe that gives you a really fun break from the day-to-day. And so Walt Disney's personal brand, and again, essentially already a differentiator kind of brand, because how many people could look at a swamp and see Magic Kingdom? Coca-Cola, another very iconic brand. So I don't know how many of you knew the founder of Coca-Cola was John Stith Pemberton. He is an American pharmacist. So he originally developed the original formula in 1886. But how many of you knew that it wasn't created to be a soft drink? It was initially created as a medicinal tonic, which was marketed as a cure for various ailments. The drink quickly gained popularity, but then after Pemberton passed on, his business associates, who would have been the new personalities that helped put an indelible imprint on the brand, particularly Asa Griggs Candler, helped transform Coca-Cola into this now globally iconic, recognized brand. And Nike, I can't right now remember the name of the movie with Viola Davis and with Matt Damon. I think I'm not going to remember that, it's slipping my mind right now, but we all know Phil Knight. Again, another visionary, another guy who could see beyond, this current idea that he had about creating a new kind of tennis shoe. But also just someone who wasn't afraid to take risks. The movie personifies him as somebody who was a little bit He seemed, I want to almost say quirky, maybe a little bit quirky in the way that he kind of approached like motivating his team. But definitely very competitive. And we all know that if you watch the movie, one of the strategic moves that Nike made that has done them justice to this day was bringing on the influencer, celebrity influencer, Michael Jordan, who would have been minimally known at the time. And so they got in early, if you will, because they had been paying attention to this kid. And one of the guys on their team realized that this young man is going places, and we want him to do it with Nike. But again, the point of taking us through those case studies is so that we can think about how founders think about yourself, think about how your personal attributes imprint the brand itself. And then there's the whole brand experience, right? There are the ideas that we have about the kind of brand that we're trying to create, but we also, in today's day and age, the marketing aspect of what we have to do to make our businesses stand out, it's really about creating experiences. So even think about what I said earlier about the Tide Pods, right? Like the experience I want to have is it's clean, it's simple, it's not messy, it's not drippy. Think about the experience that I described when I talk about why I'm an Apple loyalist. I want all of my technology to be able to talk to one another. So if I want to cut and paste something from an email that's on my phone and put it inside an email that's on my laptop, I want that to be seamless. There's been times when my kids were in the living room and I was on the second level and they're too loud, and I'm able to take over that screen and write a message on it that says, please quiet down, you're too loud. Like I love the entire brand experience that I get to have by being an Apple consumer. And so what we know is that we're trying to build a brand that does all of that. It has the sensations, it has the perception, it creates that connection between the company and the consumer or the customer. Okay, so hopefully you have your words that you got back from friends if you did the text message exercise. I would love you to think about what your personal brand really entails, what it comprises. When you're not in the room, what do people say about you? I shared some of the words that people told me they say about me, but I probably know some of the words they don't tell me too. What are you known for? So when people think about you, what do they connect your niche areas to, or what do they tell you that you're good at? And then when you think about the competition in your space, because depending on what you do, like if you're running an ice cream shop, if you're selling baked cookies or candles, I want you to think back to that image that I showed you earlier of the little caveman. What markings are different on your product, whether those markings are physical or whether those markings have to do with the experience, or whether they are whatever they are, what makes your product or service stand out? What is your personal brand? Okay, there is a workbook link, and Tanya put it in the chat when we first got going here. So I don't know, it may be all the way at the top. Tanya, it may behoove us to cut and paste that link again so that the folks can access it. But on page 23 of that workbook, there is a brand analysis worksheet, and I just want to call your attention to it in the event that you want to complete it after today's session. But there are some key considerations that you want to be thinking about as you build your brand, for looking for ways to stand out. Somebody asked about that earlier. I feel like we touched on some of that. But first and foremost is your brand reputation. So again, what do people say about your product or service when you're not in the room? What are you conscientious about in terms of the customer service that you're providing, or the research that you're providing to get to a place in a space where you do have something different that you can offer your client that your competition cannot? That experience, right? The research, the visual representation. So intentionally selecting colors, that are aligned with the attributes that you intentionally want to exhibit as part of who that brand is. Pink and blue in a big white bag means toys to a 2-year-old. What does your brand mean when people see it? What tone does it give off? There's a whole psychology behind color when we're talking about branding. And I like to remind you to have a story, okay? So we saw FedEx logo, we saw the Amazon logo. We know the story behind why those logos present the way they do. And what is it that you are going to deliver? What is the agreement that you have with your customers, with your client? What do you promise to do in every interaction? So again, on page 23, after this session, I encourage you to conduct your own brand analysis. So I'm gonna move into a new case study because one of the fun things that I've gotten to do as an entrepreneur in the last, it's been 7 months. So in March, I was able to publish my first book. I wanted to publish a book for a long time. And so I ended up, after I transitioned out of full-time industry employment into a space where I could start to build my own PR and communication firm, which would have been the end of 2019, just before the pandemic. So as I was embarking up on that journey, you all know this, you don't know what you don't know. It is scary. It feels like you just jumped off a whole cliff. So I ended up getting a recommendation from one of my colleagues to work with a life and career coach. And so as part of that year-long journey, that would have been 2022, the whole year of 2022, I was in a cohort with about 12 other women. Some of them were here in the States, some of them were not. But we're all trying to figure out, like, what do we want to do? You know, what are we trying to do with these businesses that we're trying to build? There were a couple others who wanted to write a book. And like I said, at that time, I had talked in my head ever since I was a kid. I'm like, I want to write a book. But I didn't have the intention to come out of that experience actually doing it. But even writing a book has the branding, very important branding elements associated with it. So this brand was very simple. I worked with the graphic artists who went and did the research to look at other self-help books that were actually on the shelf at the time, who was selling well. And we started with about 5 different potential options. And so it was a journey. I got to bring my I guess I would call them my audience on LinkedIn and Facebook along in this journey with me while I was writing. So, you know, I'd post regularly about I'm writing. This is what I'm writing about. And, you know, every step of the way just kept them informed. So we got to a place where we had about 5 different covers, and they actually voted on the one you see here. And so this is the color palette that was selected to bring the brand to life. Specifically, these colors were selected also because of what they represent in terms of tone and how people feel when they see those colors. So the book is about a 9-step method that helps people who feel stuck get unstuck. How do they go from that diagnosis to, okay, I'm on the other side of feeling stuck. I have a game plan and a roadmap. This is what I'm going to do now. So purple represents wisdom and spirituality, and green represents hope and freshness, and orange represents courage and confidence, and blue gives us that sense of trust and serenity and security and calm. And so those were the colors that got selected to bring all of those essences to life for the reader, and even to get to attract them to the book, to take it off the shelf in the first place. But I'm touching on the importance of understanding, again, there's a whole psychology of color when we're creating logos. And so many times when you're just getting started and we're excited, we just want to get a logo so we can get out there, we can put it on our website, we can put it on business cards or whatever. But we really want to think and be intentional to the extent that we have time to stop and think about what we're visually creating with our brand. Again, what's the reputation behind that? What are the personality attributes that connect with the founder, that connect with the business and the mission and the vision? Have we done research so that we understand who else is in that space? How do we embed the story? What do we promise? Each color selection too also has a potentially positive or negative connotation that is associated with it. So being mindful of those as we're creating a brand as well is important. So back to the case study, and as I mentioned, bringing the audience along that journey with me as I was writing my first book, and I did pre-sales. We did crowdfunding through pre-sales. But one of the things that I learned that's relevant to branding is that reach is important too. And to the extent that people can identify who you are and you're standing out, like what makes your brand different, the farther the reach, the numbers matter, right? Because what I was noticing in terms of watching the sales of this book, and I'm a first-time author, so it's not like I have this big old following already, decent, but not to the extent that I was ready to get on the shelf and be like a New York Times bestseller. But the numbers, the math at a rate of about, for every 10,000 people I was reaching, about 1% of those people were closing sales to purchase the book. So that was just another lesson that I learned as part of this case study, that I wouldn't have learned without the case study. But then the credibility that you build in your brand, the more people see it, especially if it has a consistent look and feel, it's a lot easier to get opportunities, is what I've learned. And so one of the stories that I like to share is a recent client that we closed probably back about July or August. And it is for a large, well-known nonprofit organization that services the state. But as we were sharing the services we could provide with one of the department heads who brought us in, that specific department head had to get approval from the communication leader at this organization. And so she talked to the person, she told him what firm she wanted to hire. And I was told that he said, "Oh, for sure, yes, let's hire them. Very good reputation, well known." And she gave me the person's name, who is the head of the department, and I do not know the person. So I just like to share that story because the PR is important, the consistent look and feel, the way that you show up, what your reputation, that all has intangible equity that can potentially afford you additional opportunities when you are intentional about creating and executing on that brand. So we're getting close to the end of the presentation, and Cami, I keep wanting to put a T because that sounds, it just has a rhythm. Tammy and Tanya, but it's not. Cami and Tanya. I apologize, Cami. I would be remiss if I didn't give you an opportunity to capture the QR code. If you're interested in the book or learning more about the book, that'll just take you right to the Amazon page where you can do that. I sincerely, again, appreciate having an opportunity to be in front of you this afternoon. Couple more slides, Tanya and Cami, and I'll hand it over so we can do questions and answers. I'm big on how important it is as an entrepreneur to continue to build yourself up. Avant Solutions, my team puts together a bi-monthly newsletter that comes right into your email box. I like to say it's an every other week dose of positivity, but also just some thought leader style messages, blog posts around PR, and just information that will help small businesses if you're doing it on your own, especially and particularly to get a little bit smarter on how you can approach that, or if we can ever be of service to you. So if you want to join the newsletter, you can use this QR code here. And then my final QR code, I'm full of those, is just to get some feedback from each of you. If you do not mind scanning that one and sharing your thoughts about today's presentation, I get plenty of opportunities to present, and always looking to see if I hit the mark or opportunities where I could potentially improve. So again, I thank you for having an opportunity to be in front of you this afternoon, and we can transition into questions and answers if you're ready, Tanya and Cami.
Yes, we are ready. I know I saw one come in kind of after Crystal asked, how do you fix your brand when students want to fix everything?
Who's asking? Sorry.
Crystal.
I'm not sure that I really understand the question. Crystal, would you mind getting on stage? Do you mind? Let's come back to Crystal, Tanya, just in case she might have stepped away.
Okay. Just scrolling through.
Yes,
I-
Jenna, let's connect outside. I'll put my email in the chat. Just so I can understand what's going on there to give you the best recommendation I have.
Perfect. And I didn't see any other questions that came through, just kind of the interactions between you and the chat.
There was one, Tanya, that was earlier, and it was like the #1 branding something. I don't remember. It would have been like when we first got started. I wrote it down, but I didn't write it in entirety.
Oh, yeah, that was from Angela, and I apologize. I thought that I missed that one. She did a quote from Sam Walden, and it said, "No matter the experience with a person, you can learn one thing from everyone." So she just wanted to learn your #1 branding thought that most entrepreneurs overlook when creating their brand.
I think we touched on it, and I think it's about being intentional. Because again, what I see more often than not, especially because when you're small, you don't have you don't have a budget to hire like the big pros to come in and help you with branding. And so often you're getting excited, you're just putting together a logo. It's just something to get you going. I would almost prefer that you just like picked a very simple font and put the name of the business on it without having an intention behind like the tone, the color, the psychology, the story, the promise. Because those are challenges you're gonna have to go back and fix later. And what you would really want to avoid as you're building a brand, especially if people are starting to become familiar with it, is now you got to change all of that, or at least a good bulk of it.
And then the two questions that came in were, I think, part of like where you asked what they'd like to get out. And so I'll just re-ask those here really quick. Jenna asked, what are specific ways to stand out with your branding?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd go back to thinking about what differentiates you from the competition. And then again, Jenna, think about the FedEx logo and the Amazon logo. Those are logos, they're not brands, but what we know is they live up to even what they envisioned they would become when they created those logos. They live up to it. So stand out with your differentiators and stand out with your promise, and figure out a way to visually depict that so that the 2-year-olds want to rip into the bag.
And then Shane, their question to that answer, another question from when you asked what they'd like to get out is, how do I create my brand, but also how do I leverage it?
Yeah, hopefully, some of the examples that I shared help. Creating the brand starts with being very honest about what your current reputation is, very honest about how your personal attributes have an imprint on the business you're creating, because right now it's you, right? Like, especially early on, you're the one who's going out there bringing the clients in. And that's all based on your personal brand until you get big enough for the business to really have its own identity, but it's still always going to have the imprint that you put on it as the small business owner.
Awesome. I think I got them all from when I scrolled. I know you and Jenna are going to connect about that other question outside. Looks like, hopefully I say this name right, Christiana. Why don't you sell a product like, what, we don't sell a product like Toys R Us, but a service in our construction/excavation company. How do I do things differently when we don't sell a product?
So I think it's Chrysantha, and hopefully I'm not butchering your name. I apologize if I am. I think it's important to understand where you are along that competitive analysis. And there's always competition. Some people will say, oh, I don't have any competition because no one does what I do. Yeah, but there's indirect and there's direct competition. And so understanding what you do differently, right? Like you may look at it like, oh, but we just do this construction excavation, but who else does construction excavation? And what makes how you do it different or more appealing to your avatars, who are your customers that you're going after? Also understand your customer. Everyone is not your customer. There may be customers who want an excavation company, but maybe they want an excavation company, maybe a certain segment of that, market wants an excavation company who does this or uses this specific process or uses sustainability practices. Like, understand your customer and what you deliver that's different from the competition, and capitalize on that with your brand.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions here. But as I close out, Monique, I'll just kind of keep watching for questions and then we can get those answered. But I'll just reshare my screen here if you.
For sure. I can stop share if everybody's had an opportunity to grab the QR code.
And if you
And
wanted
that
to
way we
send
can have
a
those
survey
on
to
screen.
me, I can include that in like my follow-up email as well to all the.
I will, for sure. That'll be great. Those are always very helpful.
Yes. Awesome. So let me get back here. So thank you, Monique, for sharing with us. Definitely, the one thing that caught me by surprise towards the beginning was the Amazon branding. I didn't even,
Was that your first time seeing the little smirk and it went from A to
yeah,
Z? That's because you
yeah, I
can
was like,
get
oh, wow.
everything. And we
Yeah,
all attest.
but
This is so much fun. So yes, if there are no more questions, I just want to wish everybody a great weekend, especially enjoy the weather that we have right now. It looks like maybe it'll bleed into next week, but y'all all know it could be a whole blizzard the first week of November. So let's enjoy it while we can and get outside.
yeah. Well, I do want to promote some of our upcoming trainings here. And so I'm sending a link in the chat where you can click on that and see all our upcoming trainings. But November 6th, on our first Wednesday of the month, we have Maria back with how to make your website work for you. Then November 21st, we have Monique back with the power of storytelling in today's media landscape. And so definitely get signed up if you want to learn more from Monique. She has so much knowledge. And so, and she's doing another session for us in January. And then the first Wednesday in December, Maria will be back with Reach Customers Online. So you're going to see lots of familiar faces again. And if you'd like to scan the QR code or click that link in the chat to check the trainings out. And then we ask that you save the date for Market Tech on March 25th and 26th. We encourage you to get registered. Registration is up and going. And so get signed up so you can hold your spot and come for a day and a half to learn and just network with other entrepreneurs and marketers. Then if you'd like to join us for our open office hours, you can scan that QR code. If you're wanting to know more about Grow Nebraska or just have questions as a member, feel free to always sign up and hop on those. I do lead those, and so definitely happy to chat about anything you'd like to chat about. And then I encourage you to follow us on social media to stay up to date on everything happening at Grow, but also with our members throughout the state. A lot of our members have lots of great, congratulations things going on, events. And so definitely just follow us on social media to see what's happening in your area that you can possibly support another Nebraska business. And then I did send a link in the chat as well. If you'd like to leave us a Google review, mention you are on Monique's training today, and we love to just hear your thoughts about any of the webinars you've participated in the past as well. And then if you have any questions, please contact me at the store number here or at my email, Tanya@Grow Nebraska, if you have any questions or topic suggestions. And Monique, I did see a couple questions come in. Um, Jenna wanted that survey link, so I'll just make sure to include that in the follow-up email.
Thank you.
Jenna,
Yeah, I'm sending it to you now.
perfect. And then Monica asked how to elevate the graphic of a logo with the naming convention within the logo. Is that important?
I don't know if I understand the question. Monica, email me separate and just to make sure I understand your question. Unless you're on, can you get on the stage? She might be off. So yeah, they'll have my email also.
Yes, I'll provide that in the follow-up.
Great.
And then, Jenna, I'll get that, I will get that email provided in the follow-up. So you'll have Monique's email and survey link, within that recording email we send out. And then that way, if you do have any kind of additional questions, you can reach out to Monique that way as well. But I
Awesome.
think that was all the questions I saw. And so, I'd like to thank you once again, Monique, and we look forward to chatting with you again in November.
Awesome. Have a great afternoon.
Yes, you too. Bye.